Okay, I think we're just about ready to get started. See if we can do this. All right, so today what we're going to cover, you guys have something to write on? You guys have a pen, pad, everything we're good? Awesome. We're going to cover contracts and what you should know about preparing one, presenting one, understanding one. What I did was a new agent was I filled out a fake contract and I kept that with me. So every time I would have to prepare one, I knew how to prepare it. And I would read it so I could understand it. That way when I present it to someone, it would be easier for me to do so because I already went over it so many times. So I went over it 1,000 times, so that way when I would present it, I was comfortable. It was a much easier process. Because if you don't know it, you're going to sound uncomfortable, and they're going to pick up on that right away. And they're going to be like, I think I have to see my attorney first before I sign anything, because they're not going to think that you know what you're talking about. So now we're going to go ahead and start. See if we can get this underway. Okay, so let's see if we have anybody online. I think there's a couple people who want to join us. Let's see if we can check that real quick. Give them a minute to join if they haven't been on there yet. I'm going to share it to them real quick. Yeah, we're good. All right, we're good now. Got people engaged. All right, so first thing we're going to cover is the regular standard sales contract. If you guys need to bunch up a little closer to see it here on the screen, you guys, by all means, you guys can do that. So first of all, how do you find the sales contract? Where do you go to find it, right? Obviously, a lot of different people might use different ways of doing it, but the simplest way that I found to do it is just keeping everything in your Drive. And then from Drive, you can access the documents and you can fill it out with a PDF or a PDF writer. You can use, a lot of people like DocHub or HelloSign or any kind of PDF. There's 1,000 of them you can download for free. The one we use mostly here, I think, is DocHub is what the agents like to use. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So first thing you do is you go into your Drive. Everybody has Drive. The way you access your Drive would be by going into your email, then finding. See if I can just shift this over. Finding these little 9 boxes. Once you do that, you would find your little Drive, and it brings you here. Then you will type into the search column, real estate forms. Click on that, and then that's going to bring you to all of the forms you're going to need in real estate, all of the ones you're going to need, okay? From there, you're going to go to Buyer Docs. You're going to click on Buyer Docs, and you're going to see the following. Okay. First thing you're going to see here is a blank contract. So I'm going to open that up so I can show you guys how to understand that. Okay. All right. So now with the contract, the first page of the contract. This is a debate, I guess. Some agents would say that this is the first page. Some agents would say that this is the first page, right? But either way, if you want to get technical, this is Opinion 26. Opinion 26 came around a long time ago. I'm sure it was developed by a bunch of attorneys, because what it says on the first page is that either you are going to be using an attorney or you're not going to be using an attorney. If you don't use an attorney, you're waiving your right to the 3-day attorney review period, okay? First, in the first section here, it's going to ask you how you're representing the client, right? If you're drawing up the contract, it's asking you, are you representing the seller and not the buyer? Are you representing the buyer and not the seller? Are you representing both the buyer and the seller? That would make you a disclosed dual agent. And then you have the last one that says neither the seller nor the buyer. That would make you a transaction agent. In this office, we're disclosed dual agents, so we always have to make sure that we disclose that to them when we are representing both buyer and seller. Okay, any questions so far? All right, then later on in this page here, it's gonna explain the importance of knowing that if you do have an attorney, what you're signing today is not a contract, it's only an offer or an intent to purchase that property. And then after the seller has signed it, both the buyer and the seller have a 3-day right in which they can take this offer to their attorney and they can make changes, extend the attorney review period as long as they want to, and do anything they want with this agreement. They can change it totally if they wanted to. Okay, so don't have them get too caught up in what it says here, because if their attorney doesn't agree with it, he's going to change it anyway. So, sometimes people are really hard to trust you on what you get in the sign. Just tell them, listen, this is really nothing. This is just presenting the offer. This is a placekeeper. Your attorney's going to change everything anyway. Next page. On the next page, you're going to see here the buyer section. So if you've got one buyer, we fill out one spot, 2 buyers, 2 spots, so on and so forth. If it's an LLC, you put the LLC's name. Okay? You can put the LLC's name, 123 LLC, and you can put, managing member Jim Thorpe. You could whatever you want. You can that's the buyer. Next, you'll see the address. The address is important for your buyer. Then you have the seller. If you don't represent the seller, and a lot of agents on the MLS, they're gonna write in the MLS seller's name on file, or care of Remax, or care of Prudential, whatever it is that whoever's representing the seller, they may not disclose that to you for one reason or another. They're being private about it. Long time ago, agents used to disclose owners' phone numbers on there too, because they used to make their own appointments. Like, Jim, if you want to show a house, you'd call the owner and set your own appointment. Nowadays, they don't do that, because if your listing expires, the other agents have access to see that listing, call the owner, and get the listing after it expires from you. So now they don't put the owner's name. They put either their office's phone number, or they will put showing time's phone number. And then what they do is they were in the habit of not disclosing their owner's name because they didn't want you to contact them afterwards, right? So now what you have to do is take one extra step, and you would just have to go to any tax record whatsoever. You can go to tax records on the MLS. You can go to the tax records independently on another website, and on there it's going to show you who what the seller's name is. So you get that information, you put it right here where it says seller, and then whatever address is disclosed on the tax records, you would also put that right here, just right underneath. You have a laptop with you?
Yes.
Do you have access to Google Drive? To our Google Drive?
No.
All right, let me share this with you so you can follow along. We have to create an email address for you. Give me your email.
Mateo, M-A-T-E-O.
M-A-T-E-O.
Londano, L-O-N-D-O-N-O. 98 @gmail.com.
That's when you were born?
Yeah.
I graduated the next year.
Starting early.
Shoot out.
Got it.
Okay, good. All right, so we're in a blank contract right now. We just started. We skipped the first page, but you can always check in later. So on the second page, we're just getting started with the basics, buyers and sellers information. Then we're going to figure out underneath it what the correct property address is. Sometimes we have property addresses that say 110 Main Street, but it's actually 110-112 Main Street. So whatever the actual property address you'll find on tax records is, that's what you'll want to put in here. Underneath that, you're going to put what town it's located in. So it might be located in Scotch Plains and Warren, wherever the case that is, you put that there. Then the county in which it resides. Then underneath that, you would put in the block and lot number. This is important because this is the actual legal address of the property. If you don't know what it is, you can always find that in the tax record as well. Okay? Next, underneath that, we're going to find here on our first line, we're going to find that we're going to have to put a price that we want to offer on this home. Right? So how much do we want to offer? It's whatever. Let's say for argument's sake, we're making an offer of $100,000. That $100,000 would go here. And I think what would probably serve us better would be to actually open this up with DocUp so I can actually start filling it out for you guys. Maybe that would give you a better visual. Okay. Okay, so what we have here is a sales contract. Let's see if I can maybe angle this a little bit better. Yes. Great. Okay, perfect. All right, so here you're going to see that we have the offer, in which we just pull up our little text tool. We want to write in 100 grand for this property. Then after that, we'd want to put in how much is going to be our initial deposit. So when we meet with our client, they're going to say, you know, I want to buy the house. So what do I do next, Alex? All right, well, you need to bring me a deposit for at least $1,000. Just present this offer. If there's multiple offers and there's like a multiple bidding scenario, you want to make that initial deposit as high as possible. So if your client's putting 20% down, they should have no problem putting $5,000 or $10,000 as a first deposit. It shows them how interested they are in the house. So let's just say this person here puts in $5 grand as their initial deposit because they're really interested in this house because they found a house for 100 grand and that's impossible nowadays. Next thing, additional deposits. All right, their additional deposits are required after a certain period in which everyone agrees to accept the second deposit. Most times that's after you're out of attorney review. If it's a short sale, sometimes it's after the short sale is approved. It depends on the scenario. So most times, 90% of the times, you guys are probably going to collect it after attorney review. So if your client's putting, let's say, 20% down on 100 grand, that's $20,000. He's already put down a 5. I would get them to put down the rest of the money. You know why? Because as a buyer, if I have 20 grand into a deal, I'm less likely to want to walk away from that deal. Okay? If $1,000 is the only thing you've collected from your client, that's all you're collecting throughout the whole deal. If there's a leaky faucet, you might be like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Keep my $1,000. I don't want to buy this, you know, money pit. So the more money you can get them to put down, you're doing them a favor. You're not conning them into keeping the house, but you're doing them a favor by keeping their ground. A lot of times they don't understand. Every home is going to come with, you know, Jim, more than anyone. Any home is going to come with repairs, unless it was built yesterday, and even those homes sometimes need repairs. So try to get them to put in the balance of the deposit. So let's say it's 15 grand they're putting in for that. Then let's say they're getting a 80% loan to value, right? We just said they're putting 20% down. So that means what's the balance that they are going to get from a mortgage? That's what the next line is asking. So it's 80 grand. Okay, which means that at closing, they don't have to bring absolutely anything. All the balances and all the deposits have been given. So they don't need to bring any additional funds, keep it out at 0. And we have, if you look at it, we have 100 grand. We have 5,000 first deposit, 15 grand second deposit, 80 grand as coming from the mortgage company, and 0 coming from the buyer at closing. All right, now we're gonna go and talk about the next page, where we have the first question is the initial deposit. Initial deposit is important because it can get you in a lot of trouble. If an initial deposit is gonna be given at the time when you're preparing the offer, then you can mark down that the buyer's, that the participating agent, which is the buyer's agent, if you're the listing agent and your company's the listing agent, then you can put down listing broker. If you're a participating broker, if you're an agent from another company, then you have to put down that the deposit was accepted by the participating broker. And then here you're going to put down when you accepted it or when you expect to have it. Okay, don't be scared to put down the date in the future if you don't have it yet. If your client's like, oh, I'm coming back from the Bahamas this weekend, just put the offer in for me, I'll sign it electronically. You know, that person would be like, I'll give you the check on Monday. So you would want to put on in here that I don't have the check today, I'll have the check on, 9/17/2018. It's okay if you do that, because as long as you disclose you don't have it, you're fine. The problem lies when a lot of agents, they put down that they have the deposit because the buyer snapshot a picture of the deposit with their cell phone and sent it to you. Doesn't really mean you have it, because if something goes wrong and you claim to have that deposit and you never collected it and the deal actually moved forward and that buyer gets sued for not closing on a transaction, they're going to look to you like, where's that $1,000 you're holding? Oh, I don't have it. But you claimed you had it because you wrote it in the contract. Anna, you had a question?
Yeah. Is it okay to put in the contract that you will collect it?
Yes.
When the offer is
accepted? Yeah, you can write that in. You can write it in here upon acceptance.
I don't want to take the money if they're not going to accept the offer.
You can put it here upon acceptance. And you don't even need to be the person collecting it. You can make the buyer's attorney collect it. So for instance, if I have a client that says we need a check and they never do, what I'll do is I'll create an addendum. And this is like worst case scenario when everything else fails. You create an addendum stating you're not holding a deposit, and at that point you would get them to give the deposit to their attorney, because if you collected it so far out, it's almost like borderline commingling, because you shouldn't have put down in the contract if you had it when you didn't have it. So
Yeah, I try to get it to where you give it to the attorney when the contract is accepted, so at least, we don't have to play with the money situation.
absolutely. And then when you go to closing, I know what happens to me. We get busy. We forget to ask for the escrow money. We go to closing and the attorneys look at you like, where's the escrow check? Like, oh, I forgot to request it, So if they have it, then it's one less thing you have to do later on. That's not a bad idea. Additional deposits. So that extra $15,000 that we spoke about, when are we going to collect that deposit? We can collect that deposit after attorney review. So we could just type in here very simply, after attorney review. Or we can put in here after short sale approval. Whatever it is that you want to make the date, you can make it actual a date. You can make it, collect it on 9/25/2018. You can say it's going to be collected by that date. Whatever is going to fit your transaction best. Okay.
Like 2 days after.
Attorney review. Yeah,
attorney
correct.
review,
Yeah.
So the attorney review comes in, they got 2 days to get the check.
Exactly. What some people used to do before is they used to write in there very vaguely after attorney review, like what I explained, and they wouldn't really comply with it, because after attorney review means any time after they'll close. So what some people will do, or some attorneys will do, is they'll specify that if you just put in after attorney review.
You don't know, attorney review should be 1 day or 3 days.
Correct.
So.
That kind of protects you in a way, because if you never really put a set date and you haven't collected it yet, it still gives you the opportunity to collect it. If we're going to be holding that deposit, we would put in here in this next line that the money is going to be held in the trust account of Culture Estate, or if it's not going to be held by us, we would put in here buyer's attorney, or we would put in if it's an REO bank. A lot of times they're going to want us to give it to the seller's title company or seller's attorney. So we just really have to know what the terms are going to be. The attorneys are going to change it afterwards. So if you're holding $1,000 in the office, the attorney may request that right after the closing. Right after the attorney review period. So whatever they're going to request, just make sure you pass that information along to the office. Okay, next one here in paragraph B, it's going to ask you how much is the principal mortgage? How much are you going to loan? Well, I did this with you guys already, so we know it's 80 grand. Okay. What type of mortgage are we taking out? Is it a VA? Is it a veteran that's getting this loan and they're going for a VA loan? Is it a first-time homebuyer who's getting an FHA loan? Is it a conventional loan, or is it other? A lot of times we work with hard money, so hard money would probably fit into this category. The other category, I would type into this little box or put an X, and I would just type in here private mortgage or hard money. Private mortgage just sounds a lot more cleaner than hard money, especially if you're presenting it to an agent who's never dealt with hard money. They're going to say, what kind of funding is that, Then you have this whole other hurdle that you're going to have to go over by educating the other agent. So just put that. You don't have to get so caught up on, what's the terms of your mortgage and how many years is it based off of. That's really not that important. They put it in here just to make it look fancy, but it's really not that important. Next thing you're going to see here is when are they going to get their mortgage commitment by? This is important because if you're going up against another buyer, quicker they get a mortgage, the better it is for the seller. So if you know that your mortgage rep works fast, and today is the 15th, what's today's date, 15th? And today's the 15th, and you know your mortgage lender is going to be able to close this thing soon and fast because he has all his documentation collected. He may have a commitment as early as 9/30/2018. So he may have a commitment to land on his home within the next 2 weeks. And is that pretty reasonable for commitment times, 2 weeks? It's pretty fast, right?
Well, I don't know about hard money, but
hard money.
loan, it'll take a while because they gotta do the inspections, appraisals, and they gotta come back with
Sure.
all of that.
Correct.
You're probably looking 3 weeks.
More like 3 weeks to a month, right? Okay. So to give you guys more time, give it 3 weeks or a month. If you
don't give yourself enough time, definitely the sales attorney or the agent will be calling you. You put this date down, it will hold you.
Yeah,
to
you
that
can hold you
date.
to it. Yeah, absolutely.
you
So
wanna give yourself more time just in case.
that could help you and it could hurt you because if you're up against other offers and you put a quicker commitment date, that could help you to get the offer accepted, but could also hurt you, like Anna said, if they want to hold you to the letter of the contract, and if you don't have a commitment date by that date, they can start with the termination of the contract. They can put in like all types of restrictions. They can make you. They might be able to do a time of the essence if you don't have it. It could be a lot of things that could happen if you don't meet that date. So really be careful about the date you're going to put here. If it's really a realistic 2-week commitment date, then put 2 weeks. All right, paragraph E, you're going to see here that we're going to have to put a time in which we're going to close. So if it's a slam dunk deal, 20% down, it's a vanilla deal, you might be able to close in 30, 45 days. Then you can put that, closing on, 10/30/2018. Okay, and it says it can close before that. Doesn't mean that, because I put more than ample time, and my buyer's like, no, I want to buy it before that. I want to close before that. I'm like, you can up to that date. You can close anytime before that. Believe me, everybody wants to close sooner. So just explain that to them. All right, next thing you need to worry about, if there's any items included or excluded in the sale, then you can add that into the next following paragraphs under line 107, paragraph 6, or paragraph 7. So let's just say someone has a really fancy chandelier and you want it, your client wants it, you would have to put the chandelier is included in the sale of the home. Or if they want the washer and dryer is included in the sale of the home. Because guess what? They don't have to leave you their $10,000 chandelier. They just have to leave you a chandelier. Okay?
Which one? Prior?
Which one?
One of the guys saying, the stairs don't come with the house. I'm like, you joking? They get there and everything's out of that.
Chandler has suggested that agents put her listing, MLS listing number, just in there to make it easier for the attorneys.
Yeah.
At least that it's as is. If you're not requesting anything different, just list that as per MLS number.
And that's where some agents get in trouble, because an agent will take a listing and they'll put down that everything the house has in the listing, such as like Viking stove and Thermador refrigerator, and come to find out the seller wasn't going to leave those high-end appliances. They were going to take them, because a home doesn't have to have a refrigerator to be financed. It only needs a stove. So imagine if an $8,000 refrigerator is taken, and the seller's like, I wasn't going to leave that. And if you do what Anna says, as per listing, it said in the listing, home has Thermador refrigerator. So then that would be an $8,000 charge to someone. Like it would be to the other agent. It could fall on you if you don't put it in. So always be careful with that. So that's good. Next thing, here where it says Certificate of Occupancy and Zoning Compliance. Okay, this line right here, what this states is in the event that the buyer or the seller is responsible to obtain the Certificate of Occupancy, they have a limit, a threshold, in which they can cancel the contract if it costs too much to obtain the CO. So if it costs your buyer, let's just say you put in here $1,000, if it costs them more than $1,000 to obtain that CO because the sidewalks are cracked, the window is broken, the handrail is broken, the stairs are broken, and it costs more than $1,000, that buyer is not obligated to now close on a transaction or pursue the deal, because it's going to be a financial burden on them. If you don't put anything in here, then they're going to use 1.5% of the purchase price, and that could be more than what your buyer is willing to pay for it. So you got to really find out case by case. If the buyer is responsible for doing the CO and it's a bank-owned property, they're probably not going to allow you to put anything there. They're probably going to say, you got to buy however this thing is. If it's going to cost you 10 grand to get a CO, that's something you're going to have to deal with. Okay? Same thing with the seller. The seller's responsible. They can put whatever they want. 500, 1,000 is the most typical thing I see. Okay. Yes, Fabio? I do not suggest you leave it blank unless you're dealing with an investor who is going to be buying a home as it is anyway. But if it's like a typical first-time buyer, Jim and Jane are buying a house, you want to protect them. So if if your buyer is responsible for the CO and it states that clearly on the MLS, then you need to give them a low threshold. That way, in the event that it's too much money for them, let's just say your client's barely affording buying the house, putting a deposit, moving expenses, and all these other things, they're barely affording that. Another $1,500, $2,000 in CO repairs could be that could be at the end of it for them. Okay, so make sure that you put down a reasonable amount if it's someone that is working and buying a first-time house. Okay, no problem. Next thing you need to worry about, we don't need to worry about too much municipal assessments. And here, okay. How many units is the home, right? So this is important. Read right off the MLS. Whatever the MLS says, that's what you put. You know, if the house looks like a two-family, but it's really a single, don't put down two-family, put down a single. It's whatever the MLS is claiming it to be. Later on, if the attorney runs all types of searches and the appraisal does their searches and you find out, hey, this is not a legal 2 or this is not legal 3, this is only a 1 family, at least you did your part by putting down what it said on the MLS, not what you assume. Just because a house has a basement that's rented out to someone else doesn't make it a 2-family, okay? So we'll just say in this case it's a 1-family house. You can put 1, type in 1, whatever it is, you put that in. Okay, possession, occupancy, and tenants. If there's any tenants and you have their info, you can put it here. If you don't have that data and they don't want to give it to you unless like we have a solid contract, the attorneys will get this data afterwards. The lead-based paint part here, if you know it, great. If you don't, we have a lead paint disclosure anyway that we have all our clients sign. If the home was built sometime in the 70s, you don't know if it was built before 78 or after 78, you don't have to fill this part out. You understand? If you know it was built in 1900, you can just put applicable. If it was built in 2005, you know it was built in 2005, you can put not applicable. If you're on the fence about it, just put in applicable and give the lead paint disclosure. You know, that way the buyer knows there could be lead in the home. Okay, next section you need to look at here, inspections, okay? In this section right here. Okay. All right, this says that the seller has, in this section, it says the seller has 3 days after receipt of the amendment to sign and return it to the buyer in a written counter proposal. So when they're negotiating inspections, you guys have 3 days. The seller has 3 days to either accept that, whatever you're asking for the repairs, counter it, or kill the transaction. You know, so they have 3 days. Then your buyer has 3 days to do the same thing, either accept, counter, or kill the transaction. All right. So you guys, if you don't put anything here, it's going to revert to 3 days anyway. All right. Hey, Claudia. You can sit right here. Unless you have a computer you want to set up. Yeah. You can watch me on live. That's what the Okay. Next thing. Number 14. Not that you'll see this very common. If you end up selling a house, it's like I guess in an area where it's affected. This POET system thing, this is for properties that have been in contaminated areas. So this might be applicable. I normally would leave this alone because I don't know. We don't research these things prior to making the offer. Cesspools, if you're working in like a rural area, this might be a thing. You may want to ask the listing agent, but I usually leave that blank as well. Okay, next section you need to look at is section line 323, where it says paragraph C. It asks you if there's termites in the house, your client has 14 days to inspect them. Okay, so that means that after the attorney review is over, your client will have 14 days in which they can check that out. If you're trying to get your offer accepted and you want to make it look like you guys are not wasting time, you can cut this 14 days down to 10 days, to 7 days, 5 days, whatever it is that you want. That'll give you an advantage to show the other party that you're going to be working fast. Okay, buyer's right to inspections, same thing. They have 14 days if you leave it blank. Okay, so all these little lines you see here, you would put in 5, 10, 15, 14. If your client needs a month because they're going on vacation, you put in 30 days. So whatever it is that you think you'll need, you'll put here. If you leave it blank, it's going to revert to 14 days. All right. This section here, this is where your information is going to come into play. This section is going to ask you where the information, I'm sorry, the first part, number 29, line 537 and 538, it asks you about your information as the buyer's representative. So they want to know what firm do you represent. Obviously, it's already pre-filled, culture estate. And they're also going to want your name. So you would put in here your name. That section. Next thing you're going to see is you're going to see, okay, who is representing the seller? Where are you getting the information? I'm sorry, no, this is for transaction. Okay, so we would put in here that we were representing either as a buyer's agent, if we represent only a seller, or if we represent dual agency or a transaction broker. So let's just say that we were acting only as the buyer's agent. We would just check off this section here. And then the next line asks you where the information came from. So what company provided the information? So let's just say it was XYZ Realty. They provided the info. Okay, that's all you would need to put there. And they're the seller's agent, they're the seller's representative that's already been checked off here. Down here, you would have to put in your listing firm's information. So here would be XYZ Realty. You would put in XYZ Realty's license number for their company, because their company has a license number, and so does their the agent. If you don't know the information on the MLS, it'll show you the information. You just got to click on the name of the office, or you got to click on the name of the agent. Then it'll show you the office's ID, which is the license number, and the agent's license number. And you would have to put that here. And then let's just say that the listing agent was Jim Jones, and he's the agent. We put his license number here. Office is there. Their address, which is also in the MLS. Okay, their office number, which is going to be on the MLS, obviously. Fax number is not 100% necessary. I don't know too many people that are using that anymore. The agent's cell phone number, that'll be on the MLS if you're lucky. If not, then you might have to ask for it. The agent's email address, which could be, Jim@gmail.com. And then you don't have to fill this part out where it says commission due to listing firm, because if you don't represent the seller, you don't know how much commission the seller's agent is getting. Because sometimes the seller's agent pockets a bigger part or a smaller part than what they pay out. So I usually leave this part blank. So if you're only representing the buyer, then you're going to be here underneath where it says participating firm, which is Culture State. We would put our license number in here. I think it's 1649007. Then we would put in the agent's name. Then we would put down the agent's, this is already pre-filled for you guys. We would put in the agent's number. Then we would put in here the email address. Commission, important. If you don't specify a commission here, you could be hurting yourself for a few reasons. Number one, sometimes they make changes on the MLS after they accept an offer, and if you don't notice it and everything goes unnoticed, you might be going from 3% commission on that to 2.5% if the agent is, plays games and does that. So always make sure that you put down whatever it is that's on the MLS at that point. Okay, so you would put down 3%, and it might be minus $100 for administrative fee that they might be charging. So make sure you put that. The other thing too, if the seller is offering a bonus, if the offer is presented and accepted by a certain date, or if an offer is accepted, period, then make sure you put that here. So if you don't put it, the attorneys are not going to know about it, and you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to put in here $5,000, whatever it is, the bonus amount. Okay? Make sure you always put it in. Next thing you're going to see is the section where it asks you if the buyer or the seller have a real estate license. So if your buyer has a real estate license, but they haven't used it, they're referral agents, you can put down here, yes, my client, Billy Bob, is a referral agent. You would click there. If your client is an active salesperson somewhere, you would put there. All right, now if the seller happens to be, and don't forget to hit applicable. Okay. If the seller happens to be a real estate agent, they have to put their information in here. They'll fill this part out after they receive the contract. Okay. So same thing with you guys if your buyer is one. Then we get down to the next page, which allows you to put down some additional provisions. Okay. So if this is going to require seller concession, you guys know what a seller concession is. For those of you who don't know, that's when you need help with closing costs. that's when you're going to want the seller to contribute towards the money you need to close on that transaction. It could only go towards your closing costs and your prepaids. It can't go towards your down payment, okay? So what you would have to do is you would have to type in here, seller agrees to contribute up to, is up to one word or two words? It's 2 words. Up to $10,000 towards closing costs and prepaids. Okay? That means that out of the money that the seller's getting, the 100 grand, they're not really getting 100 grand, they're gonna get 90, okay? If you don't know how much money the buyer needs for closing costs, call your loan officer, they'll tell you how much money you should be asking for. That's what I used to do when I was new. I used to call my loan officer for everything. He would tell me what I needed. So that's where it would go if you needed to sell a concession. If you need to specify other things like this, I'll tell you right now, subject to, if you need to specify something else like subject to bank approval, because it's a short sale, then you would have to put that here as well. All right, going back to the Claudia's question, closing costs and prepaids. Okay. Yeah.
No, answer her.
Huh?
Go ahead and answer her first.
Oh, okay. Closing costs when you're doing a typical loan are broken up into 2 sections. One section is the closing cost section, which is third-party fees, such as your attorney, such as the bank's fees. You would also have points, discount points if you're paying towards the bank. Anything that the borrower may incur or has already incurred, such as like the inspection, appraisal, things like that. Those are your closing costs. Now, the prepaids are the escrows that you're going to be paying for taxes and insurance. Now, when a person takes out a regular mortgage, they're going to have included in their mortgage payment the taxes and insurance, and even the mortgage insurance. So what you're going to have to do in order to set those accounts up is they're going to have to set up the escrow accounts for you. And to estimate prepaids, normally what we used to do is take 5 months of the taxes. We used to take 2 months of the insurance, and we also used to put in there 1 year of the insurance policy, because those things have to get paid prior to you closing. So those prepaids could be, your closing costs could be 5 grand, your prepaids could be equally as high, it could be another 5 grand as well. So that's why you want to ask your loan officer how much you need for closing costs. So you would definitely, when you talk to them, you would definitely need to know what the taxes are, because they're going to ask you how much of the taxes, because if you have high taxes, they're going to ask you for more. You need your sign?
Yeah, no, I'm just making sure the lights are still on.
Oh, yeah, they're still on. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So if you're using ZipLogics and you click the little checkbox
for
the seller's concession,
Yep.
it actually adds a form, an addendum
Mhm.
for the seller concession to it automatically when you're using that system.
Good.
It automatically adds the form,
It's good.
an extra.
Anna's mentioning ZipLogic. For those of you who are new and don't know what that is, ZipForms is a company that's been around for a long time, and they create like documents you can edit easily. So the National Association of Realtors teamed up with ZipForms and have this thing where you can have all the documents for real estate already in there. The only problem with ZipForms that I don't like is it's very restrictive, and you got to use like their stuff, and those documents are very hard to print. A lot of computers don't like the documents, so when you go to print, it shows up all crazy and it doesn't go to your printer. So what I've done is I've created all those documents in our database so we can just use and access from there. But it's a great system. If it wasn't so restrictive, I'd be pitching it more. So that's why we're working on solutions for that we can use with our cell phones and laptops, which we'll have very soon. Okay. Any questions so far on what what I'm covering? Okay. All right, so if you guys are clear on that part, we're going to jump into the next contract. Okay. All right, so the other type of contract that you might come across would be a letter of intent. A letter of intent is meant for a transaction that's a commercial transaction. A commercial transaction, we're not allowed to do a contract for anything that's commercial unless the attorneys request that we do it, and we'll use your contract, because there are a lot of attorneys who are not that well seasoned in commercial either, and they'll say, look, just prepare the contract, we'll use yours. So what that means is anything over 4 units is considered to be commercial. If it's 1 store and 2 apartments, 1 store and 1 apartment, that's considered commercial too. So you always want to check with the attorneys involved to see if they want you to prepare the contract, or if they want, if they're going to do it. So in the event that you're going to do it, that you're not going to do it, and you're just preparing an offer, what you would do is a letter of intent. Okay, this is a non-binding term sheet. Same thing. Okay, this is what it's called here, non-binding term sheet. It is exactly what it states it to be. It's non-binding. This is just something to get the conversation started. Then the attorney will take it from there. So this is probably one of the easiest things you guys will ever do. So let me open this one up with DocUp so you guys can see how to fill this one out. Okay, great. All right, first thing you'd want to do is put down the seller's information. Taught you guys how to do that already. Let's say the seller is ABC Management LLC. And then your buyer is QRS Investments LLC. Then you would put down in the description of the property, you would put down your property address, 123 Main Street, in town, New Jersey. Okay, that would be there. You can even go as far as putting the lot and block here as well, okay? But keep in mind, the attorney's gonna prepare this, so you're gonna put all of that information. Okay, then you're gonna put down the proposed price or the proposed rent, if this is like a commercial rent. The proposed price, let's just say for this $2 million building that your client is interested in, let's just say your client's interested in making an offer of $1.8 million. You would put that in there. Then you'd specify in here the other proposed terms. Now with commercial investments, usually what happens is that buyers do their due diligence period. It's not an inspection period, it's a due diligence period is what it's called. You know what, you know more than anyone else. You know, so we have a commercial agent here in the office, and he's done probably better types of these.
Usually what they'll do, like we would try to like pressure people to do due diligence up front.
Yes.
So they do the LOI and then due diligence,
Mhm.
and then sign the contract. So their money goes hard, like their deposit, like they don't lose it once they sign the contract.
Yeah.
But it's just a way to like make sure that they're serious.
Yeah, that's how you show how interested your client is. So like he said, good tip is to get the due diligence done up front, right? So what it would say would be due diligence, you'll leave the deposit in there, right? Deposit due upon acceptance, due diligence to be conducted prior to contract. I don't know how you would word it, but you know, the attorney would dice this up. So that means that the buyer is really interested. I'm putting in good terms. You can put other additional terms in here like all cash transaction, no contingencies. You can put in here, you know, environment, subject to clean environmental. So many things that can happen in commercial. That's why I think they limit real estate agents' ability to create these contracts, because there's so many different moving parts. I'm sure at Joe's company, they're well seasoned in doing these things, and I'm sure they have a better ability of doing it. But commercial agents only represent maybe like less than 5% of the entire realtor pool. So that's why I think that a lot of these things are left for the attorneys to do. Did you guys, for the most part, create your own contracts, or were the attorneys doing it? The attorneys would do them, right? Yeah. Even you guys who know the stuff have the attorneys doing them.
Most of the time, we would know right off the, like usually what we'll do is like have as many people see the deal and just let them go do a DD, because they can just all compete with each other.
Oh, okay.
And then we would just figure out the term. Like before we would see the LOI, I would be like, listen, like you're gonna have to lower, you know, make it 15 days of diligence. Like just keep trying to like remove stuff before they even get to that contract.
Sure. But unless what happens if you have a deal that's stagnant, it's been sitting for a year and nobody really wanted it? you would give them the buyer like more flexible terms at that point, right? The buyer can have his due diligence afterwards, or
Maybe no offers.
yeah, it is what it is, right? Something. Okay, cool. And stop me at any point because I don't do much commercial stuff. So if I'm missing something out here, then let me know. Now, what I've noticed here is that this requires no signature from the seller. I personally have had the seller sign them anyway. I'll just create my own signature line for them, and I'll have them sign it. That way, the buyer sees that they really acknowledge this. Would you guys have a different one where it was acknowledged by the seller, by the buyer somehow? Because this only requires the name of the licensee, not even the signature of the licensee, the date, and the firm, and the firm's your company. So it would be something like.
You're saying like requiring them to show them the LOI?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, how can you really prove that this offer was okay with the buyer, because there's no place for them to sign? It's really just there's nothing really stopping an unscrupulous agent to just prepare this and say, let me just get my foot in the door until I convince my buyer that this is a good deal.
It was kind of a little bit different because we would like have the buyers and the sellers, so like there usually wouldn't be an agent on the other side. So we would write this up, and they'd be like, hey, I put in the terms, 15 days DD, no contingencies, you're buying all cash. Send it to them, they'll sign it, and then you're good to go.
Okay.
We didn't really do a lot of stuff with other agents because a lot of the residential people that do commercial, they don't understand.
They don't get the stuff. Correct. All right. So correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any wrong or right way about this, but whenever I would present something like this, I would just add in an additional line here, and I would just say, you know what, this is, ABC or QRS, I think you said investments, QRS LLC, and I would just have them sign here, and then I'd present it, because that way at least it looks like the buyer did agree to these terms, and then I'd send it to the seller, and then from there the attorneys would take it, because there is no space for the seller to sign, so it's not really a contract, it's just terms, like you said.
Exactly.
All right, cool. All right, so any questions on this one, guys? Because this is probably the easiest thing you guys will ever do, if you ever have to do a commercial deal. Okay. All right. Next one, which is a little more advanced, but nonetheless, I would not want you guys to not understand it, would be an LLC buyout contract. Now let me show you an example of an LLC buyout contract. Okay, what an LLC buyout contract is a sale of a business. It's not the sale of a property. So what happens a lot in these transactions nowadays with investors is that an investor will make an offer on a property under an LLC, right? The LLC's name would be, Jim's Properties LLC, right? He buys a home at an auction, and he's like, yeah, I got this great deal. Then Jim gets approached by Alex, who Alex says, Jim, you got any properties that I could buy? I'm just starving for inventory right now. Jim says, well, I got this one. I got it at an auction, and I'd be willing to sell it to you. Okay, well, how do we do it? By this time, maybe there's no other way for you to change the name on the deed because it's already been processed through the court, or through the sheriff, or wherever auction you got it from. So then Jim decides to sell Alex the property, not actually through selling the property, but through selling Alex his membership in the LLC over to you for a fee. So let's just say you expected to, maybe pay $120, he paid $100 grand. In order for him to make the 20 grand, you would be paying him 20 grand for his membership interest in his LLC. He sent that over to you, you pay him his 20 grand. Now you take over his contract and you go and you close. You guys get it? It's like an assignment contract without having to get the seller to acknowledge the fact that it's being assigned. One of the toughest things in the wholesale world is getting a seller to acknowledge the fact that you're going to be wholesaling that to someone else, because a seller would say, wait, you can get an extra 10 grand or 50 grand for my house? Why don't I just do that then? Why don't I just wait around till someone gives me an extra 10 grand? I must be selling it too cheap. But if you did the same transaction with an LLC buyout, the LLC that made the offer is still fulfilling their obligation of buying that property. So there really is no acknowledgement necessary for that. So a lot of ways around this, but the way to do it, to make life very simple for you guys, okay? And I'm telling you, simplicity is best, because we are not paid to, run around with paperwork. We can do LLC buyout offer ourselves and, kind of go through all this and fill out anything that makes sense to us, or we can just send a request to our title company who does it for us, and they do it within the same day. And it's much cleaner because a lot of times there's mistakes on them. So what I suggest is that you guys just fill out this LLC purchase document, okay? You would be putting in the name of the LLC, the name of the buyer. You would put in the people who need to get paid out of it. Even if there's like a wholesaler involved, it doesn't matter. You just need to put it on here. And within 24 hours, you will have your LLC buyout contract back. Okay, do you guys understand what an LLC buyout is? Okay, you guys understand that sometimes you can't sell a home unless you do it that way. So when you're working with investors, you always want to encourage them to use an LLC that doesn't own anything else, a clean LLC for each property, because they never know when he may have to sell that LLC because they may not be able to close on that deal. Let's just say my investor bought a home and he got denied for financing, and he's like, holy shit, now I'm going to lose my deposit because I can't get financing. Well, there's an option now. Now you can sell that LLC and get out of that deal and at least break even or make a couple bucks. So always a good idea to encourage your investors to do that. You guys can do the same thing for yourselves when you start investing. It gets to the point where you're like juggling 30 LLCs. It's okay. At the end of the world, just stay organized, keep a spreadsheet with everything, what's active, what's not active, and close out any ones that you've already used. It's usually what I do. Any questions on what we've covered? All right. How simple is it to fill out a real estate contract? Pretty simple, right? You guys are getting it? Okay. Whoever's interested, I will print out the Doc Hub one that I was filling out so you guys can keep as just, kind of point of reference so you can revert back to it later. Feel free to write on it, explaining to yourself a simplified way what that is, highlight anything you want, and make that your Bible for the next 2 weeks where you could just like read it over and over and over again, because next time we meet or down the line, I may pick on one of you guys to explain the contract to me. And if you guys can't explain it to me, I know that you guys are not studying it, because if you don't understand it, there's no way you're going to get your client comfortable enough to sign it, and you're not going to be comfortable enough to ask for them to sign it, because what you're going to do is you're going to be showing houses, and if you use your sales ability to convince someone that was the right home for them because it was, and they were just nervous, now the next part is you getting over the hump of not understanding the contract and explaining the contract. So make sure that you do that. Nowadays, I know a lot of people tend to get contracts signed electronically. Some people are going to be old-fashioned and say, well, I don't like signing things online. I want to sit with you, and I'll bring you the deposit, and you can explain to me what I got to sign. And then they're going to want to, take the paperwork with them and not sign it that day if you don't understand it. All right. So what I've always suggested is on each page, across the top of the contract, write in there the most important 1 or 2 things about that page, because on each page you guys are going to notice that there are several things that will appear. Okay. So if you see on a page like this, for instance, let me see. Okay, like this page, for instance, right? We have five or six different paragraphs. If you start explaining every single paragraph, you're going to be there for an hour explaining this contract that the attorney is not even going to explain to them. All the attorney is going to do is tell him what he wants to change. What you need to do is know 1 thing or 2 things tops about every page, write it right across the top here, and then memorize that. That way, when you say, well, on this page, it speaks about inspections and you have 14 days to do them. On this page, it talks about what type of property this is, a 1 or 2 or 3, 4 family. On this page, it talks about how many days you'll have to counter inspections. On this page, it talks about so on and so forth. So that way you can go through that package, that entire package, in less than 10 minutes with them. The first time I ever had to explain a contract to a client, I was in my client's house forever, almost for like an hour. And the worst part is that my broker came with me because we were heading down to Atlantic City. And I'm talking about my first year in the business. So we're going down to Atlantic City for the convention. Meanwhile, we were already late, and then when we stopped by my client's house to get the contract signed, he witnessed the most, I guess, how do you say, painful thing, and having to have one of your agents explain every single line in a contract. And when we left, he was just like laughing so hard. He's like, I'm sorry, I never taught you how to explain these things, but don't ever explain a contract like that again. It's just too much. And I was thinking to myself, I did the right thing. He's like, you never do that. So I learned that day you don't have to explain everything, because they're not signing their life away. They're just making an offer. Okay, so that's my suggestion to you guys. Any questions, guys, on any?
And then after you explain each page, you
Yeah.
have them initial and sign, or
Yes.
after everything?
Well, the way I do it is like this. Good question. What I do is I explain all the documents first. That includes the CIS, the lead paint disclosure. And remember one thing, guys, is that whenever you're going to present an offer, make sure you request the lead paint disclosure from the listing agent. Because even though we have a lead paint disclosure in that folder, that's a blank one. So what your client's acknowledging is nothing. They're acknowledging nothing because there's nothing on that lead paint that says whether there's lead paint in the home or not. What you need to do is get the lead paint from the agent, or sometimes it's in the MLS. It's in the section that says media. It might be there. If it's not there, to request it from the agent. Once you have that lead paint disclosure, now you can prepare. Now you can have the seller sign the contract, sign the lead. All these things, you can do the contract before getting the lead paint disclosure, but you're gonna have to chase them down sometimes for that lead paint. You understand? So either way, just make sure you get it somehow.
No, I was gonna say that
Oh.
sometimes of that.
Yeah, sometimes it's on the MLS, correct. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that. So what I did was, going back to Fabiola, what you said, I explain all the documents first, everything, then I get them to sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. I just find it be quicker than to explain, okay, sign that. Okay, then I'm explaining the next one, now sign that. You know, so I just run through everything and just say, I highlight everywhere we need to sign. You sign first, if it's a husband and wife, just pass it around in a loop, you know, give them 2 pens, keep it moving. All right, so before we close out today, I just want to go over with you guys the trainings we have scheduled for the next 8 weeks or 7 weeks from now. Today we covered contracts. Next week we'll cover listings, everything you need to know, and the listing presentation. The week 3 we're going to cover 2 systems, NJ List Pendants and Land Voice. Week 4 we're going to cover Mojo and conversion. Week 5 we'll cover marketing. Week 6 we'll cover Zapier automation. Week 7 we'll cover the buyer's dialogue, seller's dialogue, and phone scripts. Tom will be here for that. Week 8 we'll do transaction management. Okay. Anything you guys want to talk about before we close out? You guys learn quick. This is easy. Let's see. One comment. Anyone on
The
Facebook?
conversion training is going to be the drip
Hello,
campaign
Sophie.
and drip campaigns.
Drip campaigns? For
conversion.
during yes, conversion. Yes, we will cover drip campaigns. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. All right, so we had some people watching also. So good turnout today. But thank you everyone for watching. Thank you guys for coming, and I think we did good. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
We're gonna have the contract printed out.
Yeah, I'm gonna print that out for you guys. Yeah. Anyone watching online, if you want a copy of that contract, please send me your email, and I'll send it to you guys as well. That was awesome. We did a Facebook Live show.